I am Leslie Gonzalez. I'm a third-year medical student at Western University of Health Sciences. It's a DO school in the Inland Empire, basically the Pomona area of Southern California. It's about 30 to 40 miles east of downtown LA, and I've quite enjoyed my time there. I did 2 master's programs there. One of them was a master's in medical sciences, and the other one was a biomedical master's. And that was before med school, so I really got to know the area and the campus and the professors and whatnot. But before that, I was a college student, and I worked throughout my time at college. So I worked a part-time job at Macy's, and that averaged anywhere between 20 to 30 hours weekly. I started working there as a freshman in college, and I did so as a full-time student. And so the reason why I liked working at Macy's was because of its flexibility. It really allowed me to pick up shifts and drop shifts according to what my school schedule was. I also did volunteering at a hospital, and that was about 4 to 6 hours per week, depending on how heavy my schedule was. For a brief time, I was scribing in an emergency room as what I was scribing in the emergency room, as well as working at part-time at Macy's and a college student. So I was like trying to balance 2 jobs and school, and I think that worked out for about 2 months, and then it got to be way too much. So I had to drop being a scribe in the emergency room because the hours were not as flexible as the part-time at Macy's. And when I say I was a full-time student, I was taking more than 12 units each semester, and I was working towards my degree in biology. So what really worked for me during college was that I had a lot of flexibility because of my work. So I tried to schedule. I honestly would sit and look at what my midterm schedule was going to be like, what assignments were going to be due, what quizzes were going to come up for the month, and then I would give my availability to my managers. Sometimes it was difficult because this particular Macy's catered to a lot of students, and so a lot of students were trying to, get good shifts, and kind of had to choose your battles, honestly. And there was times where I literally had to close one day and take an 8 a.m. exam the next day. And if anybody has worked in retail, you know that you don't go home when you're supposed to go home. You have to clean up, you have to make sure everything looks good and is tidy for the next day. So needless to say, I still had some problems here and there with scheduling. I always worked the weekends. I don't think there was usually a weekend where I wasn't working. If there was a weekend I wasn't working, it was because midterms were coming up, and it was particularly, a difficult science class that I was worried about. I rarely had any free time, and any free time that I had would be literally scheduled every week, and it would be dedicated mostly to family. It was very, very important to me to plan ahead of time for midterms, because especially for science courses, you only get one midterm and then your final. And so if I didn't plan ahead, I was setting myself up for failure. And I would study at the library most of the time, because coming from a Latino family, your family isn't usually that aware of your studying schedule, regardless of how many times you tell them regardless of how many times you remind them that you're studying for an exam. They will still, make noises around you, try to get you to pick up your siblings if you have siblings, try to make you do chores around the house, whatever the case may be. It's like they almost don't have boundaries, even though you try to set them, they cross them. So I tried my best to study at the library where it was quiet and it was a controlled environment. I also tried to record and rewrite notes. So particularly, for example, for a biochem class that was supposed to be like one of the more difficult classes, I recorded, this was the time before like there was recorded lectures or anything like that. I would take my phone and record the lecture, and then I would write my own notes during class, but then I would go home and re-listen to that lecture, and I would fill in the gaps. And usually, most often, I missed a lot. I would miss a lot. So I would take those notes and reread them, make them nicer, and reread them many times. And that's kind of how I would study for that, some of those classes, for the science courses specifically. I initially had a lot of trouble with basic science courses. In high school, I did take my science courses, but there was nothing compared to, undergrad level courses. So when I started struggling, honestly, the first thing that my counselor said to do, my pre-health counselor said to do, was to go to office hours. So I don't know. I think that's something in the Latino community where you don't really ask for help. And if you do ask for help, it's like when there's like the point of no return, when you've already expended all your resources and the last thing left to do is for you to ask for help. So I had to really just kind of swallow my pride and humble myself and go to these office hours and say, I don't understand XYZ. Could you explain it to me? And most of the time, professors were really good at explaining and walking you through concepts. I remember there was one particular professor who, it was for a genetics class. And Lord, I struggled so much through that class, and I went to office hours frequently. And this particular professor was a great teacher. He would try to explain things, and he worked with me so that I could start using the proper terminology. And that's something that I wasn't doing. I wasn't using like the proper terminology of that genetics class. And once he would kind of force me to use the proper terminology, that's when things started clicking. So little things like that I would have never, thought about it on my own, really helped when I sought out help. Another thing that I also did was tutoring, specifically for math classes. I'm not very good at math. So in order to pass through my classes, because I had to work my way up to calculus, I got tutoring from other students. And that was a little bit more difficult just because sometimes students teaching students is the blind leading the blind. So I had to work a little extra hard at that, at the tutoring part, but nonetheless, I still sought it. Oh, I think that was mine. Oh my God, I'm sorry about that. Okay, so then I wanted to kind of go over a little bit of do's and don'ts of kind of working in college. So first and foremost, once you decide that you want to be pre-health, need, or pre-med, pre-health, any route that you want to go in the healthcare industry, you have to meet with a counselor and plan all your classes out. So this worked out to my advantage because within the first few weeks of starting college, I met with my counselor and sat down and said, okay, I want to go to med school, and this is how I plan to do it. And this particular counselor was blunt and said, okay, look, you can't put these classes together. This is not going to work out for you if you put 3 hard science courses together. So that she helped me plan out all my years of college with every single class that I would take, when I should take the Mcat, and when ideally I wanted to get into med school. And it was a 4-year plan for me because I had envisioned myself graduating in 4 years. And so I, for the most part, followed that and didn't really go see her for the first, I guess after that, I didn't really go see her because I had my plan. And then when it got time to figure out MCAT stuff, that's when I revisited her. Definitely, as I was saying, it's good to plan out your classes. You have to also have a 5-year plan. Like, what do you want to do in 5 years once you start college? Do you want to graduate college in 4 years? Or are you in no rush and want to do it in 5 or 6? And what do you want to do after, and how you're going to get there? It's very important to plan these things out, because once you're in it, it goes by so quick. And things like this, things like going into a pre-health career, you have to really kind of build up your resume and really try to do things for a long time. So when you're working, as a student who's working, that makes things a little bit more difficult, because now you have time. You know, your time is really divided up into working and going to school. And so your time is very limited, and you're on this schedule that if you deviate a little bit, if something doesn't go well in school, let's say you fail a class, or you fail an exam, or now, you know, because you were working a lot of hours one particular week and you didn't study enough for your midterm, and now you're in danger of failing this class. So it's important to have a rough, you know, a kind of an idea of what each step of the way is going to look like. Because if there's a hiccup along the way, then you're going to have to pivot, and you're going to have to create a different plan, and it's going to start looking different from what you imagined. And it's better to be prepared and have, you know, plan A, B, and C than have no plan at all. So then another thing that I would suggest is definitely, like, get in the habit of writing down the days that you work, and the days that you have your classes, the days that you're going to have exams, the days that are free for you. And please have at least one day of just downtime where you're not studying and you're not working, because it will get to you. Don't cram hard. I'm sorry, there's a mistake here, but don't cram more than 2 science courses into a semester. When you first start out college, everybody is very happy. They're in college, they're finally doing what they want to do. They want to take as many science classes as they want because they want to get through it quickly. That is very detrimental to you, especially if you're a working student, because science courses are meant, like the first few science courses of a degree are meant to weed out people who are not serious. And the very fact that you're here listening to this webinar means that you're very, very serious about what you want to do and who you want to be. So if you can, do not cram more than 2 hard science courses into one semester, because these are the prereqs that are going to be very important when you apply. And yeah, let's say you get an A in sociology or psychology or something like that, but how did you do on your prereqs? Sometimes it comes down to like, how did they do on their prereqs? So you don't want to mess this up because you're impatient. Another thing that I learned all along the way was when I was taking the Mcat. So when I was taking the Mcat, again, I was wanting to rush the process. I went and enrolled in a Kaplan course. And I was also a full-time student. And I was also working part-time. Now, a lot of people told me that I should have not done that. And I was, kind of naive and didn't want to listen to anybody's advice. And I did it anyways. It was so hard. It was one of the most stressful times of college because there was a lot of things at stake. You have to worry about your grades in college. You have to worry about this, MCAT that at that time when I first studied for the MCAT was the 4-hour course, 4-hour exam. And then also worry about making money, right? Because most of the time we're all working because there's a need at home for you to bring in money. So you have a lot of pressure and stresses coming at you from different angles. So yeah, that was kind of my story when I think I took the Kaplan course the spring semester of my junior year, so that I would take it at the end of the semester, ideally take the MCAT at the end of the semester and apply that summer to medical school. That was my plan. And then I ended up finishing the Kaplan course. I was kind of iffy about it. Still studied a little bit on my own and then decided to take the MCAT. Got the MCAT and it was not good. It was not good. And then I was faced with the kind of decision of what I wanted to do, because I had originally planned that I was going to apply summer and then start getting interviews in my senior year and then get in somewhere and then immediately right after college start medical school. But because I had performed, really bad on the MCAT, that didn't end up happening. So here I go again to my pre-health advisor, and I ask her, what do I do? What are my options? What will kind of help me recover from this? And she had to be honest with me. And she said, look, you have to do a post-bac program and or a special master's program. So I just sit long and think long and hard about what had I done wrong? Where did I go wrong? And I think it was a combination of things. Obviously, working didn't help. And I, had classmates who did not work at all, who didn't have that pressure and responsibility of working to bring home money. And it kind of just messes with your confidence because it feels like it's something that's predestined for you. Like, there's no way out of working. So this is how things are going to be like. They're going to be difficult, but that's not the case. Because there's been many people who work throughout college and end up going to professional school and come out a better person. Okay. So then study strategies that worked for me. And I really had to figure this out along the way in college. And the number one thing that helped me was taking a learning style quiz. So there's different types of learners. There's visual learners, there's learners who learn by hearing. There's learners who learn by using their hands. And once I took this learning style quiz, it told me that I was a visual learner. So once I started really writing down my notes in colorful, with colorful pens and using a whiteboard and really just incorporating things that were visual, my grades started to improve. And then I wasn't with limited time that you have as a working student, you don't want to mess around. And you want to be efficient and study as much as you can when you have your limited amount of time. And then I also sought out help during office hours and tutoring. And that kind of combination of knowing what type of learner I was, knowing how I learned best, and knowing that tutoring and office hours helped me succeed, yield the best results for me. Once I got that formula down, everything else was easy. I think it took me my first 2 years of college to figure that out. And once I figured that out, my junior and senior year were significantly easier because I had figured it out. And so, I would sometimes at work, I actually would not study during work. It was just difficult for me to switch back and forth, and it wasn't efficient. I know some people like doing stuff during their break time and I don't know, going to their car and reading, but it was not efficient. And the name of the game here is being efficient. When your time is limited, you want to be as efficient as you can. Okay. With that being said, I know that when you're working and when you're a full-time college student, it is so difficult to find time for yourself. And it's almost as if you feel guilty for taking time off, for taking a break, because you feel like I should be studying. Or let's say you take a day off and you're like, oh man, I'm losing out on this amount of income for taking that day off. And that leads to burnout. It's important to set boundaries, not only with family and friends, but with yourself as well. You have to draw the line somewhere. Remember, what you're doing is difficult work. Your biology is biology and the prereqs and all those chemistry courses and those higher level upper divisions are hard work. They're not easy, and they're not meant to be easy. Because the career that you're choosing is not an easy career, and there's a lot at stake. So you expend so much energy just by being in those spaces. So it's important to make boundaries for yourself. Know when enough is enough. When you're just reading to not really learn, but to not feel guilty. When too much work is too much work. And if you learn how to recognize when you're crossing those boundaries or when you're about to cross those boundaries, your mental health and your physical health will be a lot better. And it's also important to set boundaries with your family because, at least for example, my family, I'm first gen, and I'm the oldest of all my siblings, so they didn't really understand how college work, and I lived at home to top it off. I went to a commuter school, so it was difficult to let them know, like, hey, right now it's not time for me to help you clean. It's not time for me to help you do grocery shopping or whatever the case may be. It's time for me to sit down and study and take care of myself. And they don't, bless their hearts, sometimes they just generally don't understand that. And it's not really their fault, but we have to help them understand and have serious conversations with them, because if we don't, they're not going to understand and your studying is going to be interrupted. It's okay to take your time in college. I had this arbitrary timeline that I wanted to graduate in 4 years. And first, realistically speaking, some people should not do it in 4 years. Some people should do it in 5. Some people should do it in 6, 7, or 8. Whatever works for you, whatever's going to set you up for success is the right amount of time that you should be in college for. I always tell people that, if you have things going on in your life, such as work and volunteering and extracurriculars and, full-time student and trying to do prereqs and trying to, eventually study for Mcat, you cannot fit all that stuff in and succeed at every single thing in such a short amount of time. You should put your best foot forward and apply to whatever professional school it is that you want to apply to as your best self. Even if that takes 8 years to build the perfect application, so be it. No, I know that you're going to receive outside pressures from family, from friends, and sometimes from yourself to finish in a certain amount of time. But that, realistically speaking, is not what sets you up for success. And I learned that the hard way because I wanted to basically have it all. I wanted to work and have money and go through college as a full-time student and volunteer at a hospital and also participate in organizations on campus. And things suffered because of that, because I didn't set boundaries. I didn't set boundaries with myself. I learned how to set those boundaries later on in life, but definitely didn't learn that along the way in college. Just to kind of, I guess, would definitely like to continue this conversation. It doesn't stop here. I'm going to check the questions to see if there's any questions that I might have missed.
I
Okay, I don't see any questions.
in the group chat either. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to type them in now, or I'll have you unmute your mics if you'd like. Just give me a moment to do that, and then you can go ahead and ask any questions you have for Leslie.
You can ask me any question. It doesn't matter if it's about work or not.
It looks like we have a question in the
all
chat.
yours. Ooh. Okay, let's see. Question says, what type of boundaries do you set for yourself as a full-time student and work? Okay, so one boundary that you need to be aware of is that people will always ask more from you. So at work, let's say, bosses will always text you, hey, can you come in at this time? Hey, can you start earlier? Hey, can you do the XYZ? Literally, sometimes you have to put your foot down and say no. I know you might think, well, it's an extra $50 on my paycheck. Well, it's more hours for me to pay whatever I'm making. But you have to think about, okay, what are the pros and cons of this? Pros, I'll get more money. Cons, I have less time to study. Those are the type of boundaries I'm talking about. Learning to say no. And no to family too, because family will ask more of you as you get older. And that's a hard one, learning to say no to family. Because again, this path that we're all on, this pre-health path, is difficult. And if you don't advocate for yourself, nobody else will. Oh, okay. See. Okay. Okay.
Leslie, I'm gonna
Uh,
share
uh-huh.
my screen if you don't mind. That way the
Oh, yeah.
messages aren't showing up.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, sorry.
there we go.
Let me know when it's okay to.
I believe, yeah, so my screen is up. So you can go ahead and scroll through any private messages you have there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for letting me know. I'm so sorry about
No
that, you guys
problem.
didn't know. Okay. So did you get any back grades and how did you fix this to get into med school if you did? Okay. So yes, I did get back grades. So let's see. Definitely got some C's in prereq classes. The only class that I failed was physics. Okay. So like I said, I'm not good at math. So when I took physics, I was in my junior year, I believe. So I took it and oh my God, it was difficult. This is how bad it got. So I did tutoring. It was very difficult, even though I did tutoring for physics. Unfortunately, my grandfather who lived with me ended up passing away a day before my midterm, and I still showed up for my midterm and took it. Um, I don't remember what grade I got on that midterm, but I just was so afraid of failing that I did that. I didn't allow myself to grieve. And so I ended up failing that class and had to retake it during summer and pay out of pocket to take it. Um, and it's more expensive during summer. So yeah, I had that on my transcript. And so when I applied, because I didn't apply to med school straight out of college, I applied to a master's program. That was one of the reasons why I applied to a special master's program to help me with my science GPA because it was not the strongest. So I built up my science GPA through that master's program. How did you deal with imposter syndrome? Well, the therapy, honestly. Imposter syndrome is something that is always there. It's always lurking. I didn't know it was called imposter syndrome in college. Didn't know about it until medical school. But yeah, just by honestly being like one of the few Latinx students in science courses, I was always subconsciously there. Um, I think I didn't deal with the imposter syndrome very well in college. It was some time until I accepted that I was meant to be in these spaces, that it wasn't a coincidence, that it wasn't pure luck, that I had worked really hard to be where I'm at. And I think through therapy, it helped me realize that I was not an imposter. I was meant to be where I'm at. And a lot of the times you feel like an imposter when you start to struggle because you feel like others around you are not struggling and you're the only one struggling. But the truth is that nobody talks about their struggles, especially in college, because everybody's competing against each other. One thing that I tried my best was to not get involved in that kind of mentality with other people. Because once people start sharing grades and what they're doing, what internship they're doing, or what research project they're on, that's when the imposter syndrome starts to creep back in. So I try to keep myself away from that type of toxic environment as much as possible. Was my school a semester or quarter? If quarter, so how did you manage it? Oh, my school was actually semester. Um, so it was easier to manage than quarter system because I know quarter system goes much quicker. So yeah, I think that was a blessing in disguise, the fact that it was a semester based school. What strategies did you use to study for the MCAT while working, going to school? Private. Okay, so yeah, so the one thing that I did for studying for the MCAT the first time around was, like I said, the Kaplan course, and it was really, really, really hard to juggle all those three things, studying for the MCAT, full-time student, and then working part-time. Because I always came into the Kaplan course unprepared. They always had like, homework that you were supposed to do before coming into the course. I never got to finish it. I was always unprepared, and I don't feel like I got the full experience of the Kaplan course. So looking back, the way that I wish I would have done it was like if I had to be in school, then I would have made that semester like a light load of courses, like what I would consider like lighter classes, not like hard up division courses. And then do my MCAT coursework on the side and maybe not work as much. This is where it gets difficult because sometimes people don't have flexibility in their jobs, or they can't work less hours. So that's why I'm saying you have to plan out in advance, because the best thing that worked out for me was actually studying during summer and not working, not going to college, not having any college courses. It was just solely dedicated to studying for the MCAT. And the way that I would study, I self-studied. No, actually I had a Kaplan course, but this one was like where it was like kind of webinar based. So I would have like 3 hours of webinar based classes 2 times a week, I believe, and then the rest I had certain assignments that I had to do, and that kind of learning helped me a lot because I was more in control of how I studied. And I would always, always, always go to libraries. There was not a day where I would study at home because it was just not a learning environment to be at home. I literally would have the same schedule every day. So I would get up early in the morning, have my coffee, something light to eat, go to a library, stay there for like maybe 4 hours or so, and then come home for lunch, give myself an hour break, where I could just decompress, watch TV, eat, whatever that is. And then I would go back to the library until they closed. And I did that basically 6 days a week for about, I want to say 2 months. And that finally allowed me to score higher on my MCAT. And I did that as well for my step exams for medical school, and it worked out. Okay, let's see. Okay, so how did you overcome this feeling of being constantly behind due to not putting in as much work as you should in classes, due to work and being there for your family and what family asks something? Damn, that's a good question. Yeah, you really do have like this impending sense of like feeling like you're behind on something, whether it's school, work, or family. Being organized definitely helps, but you can't really avoid it. Because you're not giving something 100%, like your 100% full attention, it's always gonna feel like you're running behind. But being organized is what helped me the most. Literally, you don't have to be fancy. You can literally go to the 99-cent store, buy a little notepad, and write your to-do list of what you need to do. It's that step. I still do that to this day. I don't use any fancy iPad or iPhone to write what I need to do. I write everything in a notepad, and it keeps me a lot organized. So that would definitely help in terms of school. In terms of work, I'm gonna be honest with you. I still feel like that. I still feel like I'm behind. Like I'm behind on like what's going on with my family and whatnot. But that's just because I'm focusing on my career, and that this career demands that from you. You have to like give it almost like pretty much your full attention, because it is so complicated. So that almost feeling doesn't go away, and you can't beat yourself up too much for it, because you're just doing you. Okay, let's see. What do you tell people, especially friends and family, who are pressuring you to take the MCAT or apply to med school? Yes, this is definitely something that happens all the time. Um, it's hard because they come from a good place, you know, for the most part, but they just don't understand the time constraints and how difficult something like the MCAT could be in applying to med school. I used to get that a lot from my parents, like, when are you applying to med school? What are you doing? What are you doing? I don't know. Honestly, like, what helped me the most to help them understand is sitting down with them and talking to them about what my timeline was, and what were the different paths that I could take to get there, and how I was planning on getting there. I think once I did that, especially with my dad, he started to understand little by little that this was a long-term thing, that this is a long career that requires different steps and requires you to not rush it. Because if you rush it, you're going to do things haphazardly, and that's when you run into obstacles. So that is what helped the most, like sitting down and sharing with them your timeline and how you plan on getting there, and how their support is crucial to your success, because without their support without their support, it's going to be very difficult to do these things. And by support, it doesn't have to be monetarily. Literally, it could be something like, you know, Mom, you can support me by not asking me to, I don't know, pick up my siblings on this day from school. Or Dad, you can help me support. You can support me by not asking me to do these chores around the house when I'm studying, or not interrupting my studying, or keeping it quiet, like that type of thing. And with friends, honestly, like, there's going to be some friends that totally support you 100% and get your journey, but there's some friends that don't. They won't get your journey. They won't understand why you study so much, why you work so much, why you're sacrificing so much. And I know it sucks, but you can't have friends like that around you. At least not involve them too much in your life, because they are the ones who are going to introduce doubt into your life, and you don't want any doubt. Okay, let's see. Can you talk about your experience in your special master's program? Where did you go? When did you think it would be okay to apply to an SMP, which is a special master's program? Gracias. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you. Okay, so my experience with the special master's program was good and bad. So I chose to do a special master's program because you get financial aid, because you're doing a master's, so you get financial aid. And with a post-bac, you're not really getting a degree per se at the end of it, so you don't get financial aid most of the time. And I could not pay out of pocket. My parents were not going to be able to afford thousands and thousands of dollars of tuition. So I did a special master's program where I could get financial aid. I chose the master's program that I went to, which was at Western, because it was far enough away from home, but still close, where I could go visit. And it eventually helped me get into the medical school of my choice, which was Western. I liked it because it really taught me how to take really difficult science courses, and how to study at a graduate level. Had I gone straight from college to medical school, I don't know if I would have survived, because the way you study in college and then something like professional school is completely different. So it really helped me in refining my study skills, and really just dedicating every single minute to school. Because before, I had to juggle work and other extracurricular activities, but in a special master's program, you don't work. you don't work at all. All the money that you get from financial aid is to help you find a place to live and, pay your bills and whatnot. But you have to dedicate 100% of your time to school. So when did I think it was okay to apply to the SMP was when I didn't get a good score on my Mcat the first time around. And I know I didn't want to take a gap year because I honestly, the whole thing of rushing like, well, I want to get into medical school. So the next best thing that I need to do is an SMP. So that's when I sat down with my pre-health advisor and we planned out like which SMPs I was going to apply to and why I should do an SMP versus a post-bac program. And you also have to look at, the different types of SMPs out there because they're not created equal. Some of them are much more competitive than others. Some of them ask you to get like a really impossibly high score on MCAT, and you're competing with like 30 other different, possible candidates. So it gets very competitive. So you have to really look at the fine details of each master's program. Okay, there's another one. I'm still trying to take some of the prereq classes over again because I did not do well in OChem and the other classes. It's been so long that I don't remember the material. I have to work because I support myself and need to pay for my classes as well. So I am trying to do what I can. I applied to postbac programs that were rejected because they said I was not doing enough. I can only take 1 or 2 classes each semester because I work full-time and part-time and have an internship. What basic skills can help me with time management? Organizing everything that you have to do, and like I said, like the planning out what every single semester will look like for you in terms of classes and when ideally you want to apply to your professional program. That's what's going to help you the most in terms of time management and learning how to be efficient as well. It's really easy to say that you're studying for, let's say, 5 hours, right? But how much of those 5 hours are you on social media? Are you distracted because you have some other thing going on? So it comes down to being efficient with your studying time, being efficient with other things in your life. Being efficient with your study time and making sure everybody around you is on the same page also helps you out a lot because if you have people around you, family, friends, and they're helping you with the littlest of things, now you automatically have more time to study and dedicate to your internships and these other things instead of dealing with this other crap. So that would be my advice to you. But keep on pushing. I know people who didn't go into med school. My best friend actually didn't get into med school until he was 40. And he's a third year medical student just like me. He's loving it. So take your time. Any advice for students who are struggling with staying motivated? Tips, tricks. Also, when you applied to med school, was it both MD and DO, and how did you decide? Okay, so one thing that helps me stay motivated, because it's so easy to really lose sight of your dream, is by volunteering at a hospital and by talking to the doctors, residents, nurses, and just being in that environment. Even if I wasn't like proactively like doing something that was medically related, I was still in that environment and I was still kind of living it. So it would serve as a reminder as to why I was doing what I was doing. And one thing that really solidified that this was something that I wanted to work towards was when I would be an interpreter, because then I was using my skill of knowing a second language to help other people. Like maybe I didn't have the medical knowledge yet or the clinical knowledge, but I definitely had a skill that I can use at that point in time, and that really kept me motivated. When I applied to med school, I applied to both MDs and DO schools. And I ultimately chose the DO route because, for many factors, but one of the main factor was because I actually got to shadow a lot of DO doctors, and a lot of them were very friendly. I know that the DO schools that I had applied to really took a look at students as holistically and really took into account different factors, I guess. And so that appealed to me more than per se MD. And quite honestly, I got way more interviews from DO schools than MDs. So it was just easier for me to see which profession, or not which profession, but which type of school was much more welcoming towards the type of person that I was in my journey. What do you see in the future after medical school? What specialties catch your attention the most? Right now, family medicine catches my attention the most because you could literally do anything and everything. You can tailor your practice to whatever type of patients you want to see. You can work at a hospital setting if that's what you want. You can exclusively work in an office setting if that's what you want. So I like how flexible family medicine is. And in the future after medical school, honestly, like when you are trying to get into medical school, when you are in medical school, all you see yourself is being a doctor. But there's so many different things that a doctor can be, and have like a great quality of life. It's not just like clinical medicine where you think of like working at a hospital or working at an outpatient office. There's a lot of companies that need doctors to consult. There's a lot of, journalism, like medical journalism is a thing. Entrepreneurship is another thing. A lot of healthcare startups. So there's many different avenues that you as a doctor can take, not just clinical medicine. How long did you study for the MCAT and some materials you used to study? So I studied 2 times. First time I studied 3 months, I think, with the combination of the Kaplan course. And then the second time I did 2 months-ish and did the Kaplan course again. But this Kaplan course was more so a webinar based rather than actually going to a class where they had a teacher and they taught you. Yeah, that was the last question. Any other questions that anybody wanted to ask? Any recommendations, concerns, anything?
All right. Thank you, Leslie, so much for hosting this and for giving some awesome advice and answering all those questions.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you for all of you for showing up and taking time out of your schedule. I know all of your time is very limited. And like I said, the fact that you're showing up today just means that you're really serious. So don't give up on whatever dream you have. I know there's going to be a lot of naysayers. I know that you're going to encounter a lot of obstacles, but you can get through it. There was many days where I cried, where I thought that I wasn't meant for this profession, where I failed exams, failed courses, failed a lot of things. But the one thing that kept me pushing through was that I loved it, and that this community needs more Latinx healthcare providers. And I knew that that was the right path for me, and that even though it was hard, I was meant to be there. So keep on doing it. I'm always available for you. If you have any more questions or any concerns, you can send me a DM at LeslieXGP, and I'll try my best to answer it. Thank you.